Good morning, church. My name is Carson, if we have never met before, and it is such a gift to be with you today. If you're linking in with us online, it's such a gift that you decided to watch with us this morning. If you're in Leland, in your brand new building, I hope that you're having a great morning so far. And if you're here in Wilmington, it is such a gift to see you face to face. I'm so excited about where we are going today. We're starting a 3-part series today. I'm preaching this week, and then Mike is preaching the next 2 weeks, which means I get to open a big box this week, and then he has to deal with it for the next 2 weeks. So I'm pretty excited about that. But this series is actually a big part of our journey towards the cross as we begin as a church to prepare for Easter. And something that I want you to know and that I want all of us to be a part of. If you're watching online, if you're in Leland, if you're here in the room, we all need to be a part of this. And it's called the Journey to the Cross. It's a walkthrough of the Gospel of John. It's a reading plan that we're going to be releasing through our daily devotions beginning this Wednesday on Ash Wednesday. And I think it's going to prepare us in a really, really special way for Easter this year. So you can go to our website. You can get all the details about that. If you already get our devotions, you're already signed up, ready to go. You can look for those beginning on Wednesday morning. But we are starting a series today called Undeniable. And it's really exploring what does it look like to find our way in a life marked by sacrificial love. And I love the image here of the cross and this idea of what does it look like to deny ourselves, which is an invitation that Jesus gives that we're going to explore over the course of the next couple weeks. And I believe it's an invitation that will lead to a great deal of transformation in my life and in your life if and only if you take it seriously. Because Jesus' invitation is packed full of truth and reality for us right here, right now, 2024, on planet Earth. So if you have your Bible with you, I'd love to ask you to turn to Matthew chapter 16. If you don't have your Bible, you can pull out your phone. Just don't go to Instagram. If you want a paper Bible, we would love to give you one for free in the Connect Center on your way out of the building here in Wilmington. Matthew 16, we're going to start actually in verse 24, which is where we see Jesus give us this invitation. We're going to read through it. I'm going to pray for our time together. Then we're going to go all the way back to verse 1 of chapter 16, and we're going to look at all the context that builds up to this invitation. Matthew 16, verse 24, it says, "Then Jesus said to his disciples, 'Whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me. For whoever wants to save their life will lose it, but whoever loses their life for me will find it. What good will it be for someone to gain the whole world yet forfeit their soul? Or what can anyone give in exchange for their soul? For the Son of Man is going to come in his Father's glory with his angels, and then he will reward each person according to what they have done. Truly, I tell you, some who are standing here will not taste death before they see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom.'" God, we thank you for today. Thank you for this message. Thank you for this invitation. Thank you for what you have done for all of us. Thank you for our church. Thank you for everyone gathered in Leland and in New Bern and online and in this room in this moment. Thank you for the beauty of your movement around the world today. God, we pray that we would honor you by what we learn and talk about today, and that we would leave this place changed people. God, we love you, and we say this in your name. Amen. About a year ago, I joined a gym, and some of you are like, mistake. About a year ago, I joined the gym, and I didn't really know what I was doing. I went to one training appointment. This guy showed me how to use the gym, and I was like, how hard can it be? So I started going week in and week out, and what I found is I had no idea what I was doing, and I really had no business being at the gym by myself. It really consisted of me going and watching other people work out, which there's a word for that, creepy. But I'm like, I don't know what else to do, so I'm literally watching people go like this, and I'm like, okay, cool, I can do that. And then, you especially follow around the people that are walking around with their shoulders up, that. Those are the people that you want to model your gym habits after, right? Well, it didn't work for me. Over the past year, I did not get great results. A good friend of mine, he comes to church here. His name's Chad, and he goes to the same gym that I go to. And what I began to notice at the end of every time that we saw each other at the gym, there was one really distinct difference between the two of us. He was sweating, and I wasn't. And I was like, I think the point of the gym is to sweat at minimum. They have all these sweat rags when you walk in. It's like, I'm not doing this right. Well, long story short, a couple of weeks ago, actually, at the 9 o'clock gathering, I ran into Chad. We're talking about my gym woes. And he's like, why don't you come join this class that I go to? And I was like, oh, cool. How hard can it be? So I went the next morning. They put this little monitor on my chest, and they put these numbers up on the screen. And I thought it was a competition to have the biggest number. Well, that number was your heart rate. So Jesus and I almost met face to face a couple weeks ago because I was trying to win the competition. And Chad walks in and he's like, hey, bro, I know you're like young and all, but like you need to slow down a little bit. Well, then I go a couple days later and I'm like, well, I've already been to the class. I know what this is like. This can't be that hard. And what we were doing that day is deadlifts. And I say that like I'm a gym professional, most certainly not. But that was what they called them. And if you guys remember, Mike preached with this a while back about the future of the church. So I said, well, can I borrow it? And so a deadlift, for those of you that don't know, and just don't judge me, okay? You go up to something that looks like this. I think it's called a barbell. And you reach down and you pick it up and then you just do that over and over and over again. Well, as I'm doing this, I noticed the instructor standing over my shoulder. This is just pro tip. If you go to a workout class and the instructor is standing over your shoulder, it's not because you're doing something right, okay? Like, she's like, hey, Carson, you need to, we're all in church, so we'll just clean this up a little bit. You need to stick your rear out a little bit. No one's ever told me that before. Like, that's a new thing. It's 5:15 in the morning. I'm like, okay, so I did it. And she's like, no, a little bit more. And I was like, okay. And she's like, no, a little bit more. See, my form was terrible because I had never done it before. Watch this. Jesus' invitation, his challenge to us to deny ourselves, it's no different. He's saying your form, your way, your approach to life is off. Why was it important for her to tell me that my form was off? Because if I didn't change it, I was going to get hurt. And the invitation of Jesus to deny ourselves is actually an invitation to fix some things about our approach to life so that we don't get hurt. And I think that the reality is that worshiping anything other than Jesus will leave you hurt. And the way that I would define worship is to ascribe ultimate worth to something. If you ascribe ultimate worth to anything but Jesus, it's going to leave you hurt and in more pain than is necessary in this life. And I think that the reality of this is like, how do you begin to articulate? What does it look like to deny yourself? Well, I think first it is required is to evaluate what is so heavy about yourself. Because as we carry around our identity and our self in this life, a couple things kind of bubble to the surface that come with ourself, our expectations. Our expectations for how we think life should go. Our expectations for when we should find a spouse. Our expectations for when we should graduate school. Or our expectations for how retirement should go. Then you have our preferences, the things that are convenient. Those begin to get really, really heavy because we have to arrange our life around all of these areas of convenience in order to find joy in our life. Then you think about our ambitions. Some of us would describe ourselves as ambitious people and some of us may not, but at the end of the day, you have desires, you have dreams for your time here on planet Earth, and they get really, really heavy the older that you get. And then you have your frustrations. Some of you are so frustrated with your family walking in the door to church today. And I'm so glad that you made it to church. But that frustration, that gets heavy. And if you don't have the right form, it's going to hurt you. And Jesus is saying, hey, don't miss it. Don't get distracted. I'm here for you. I'm going to show you the right approach. So that is the context of where we are going today. And verse 24 is really the climax of a larger narrative that we see in the story. But when you really step back and you look at it, when we evaluate the invitation of Jesus to deny ourselves, we're actually evaluating and we see that it's an invitation like no other because Jesus is inviting us to do the same thing that he did. He embraced a cross. He died to himself for the sake of us and our salvation, but also as an example, as a pathway to life and life to the full. And the truth is, we look for all of the right things in all of the wrong places. This little piece of plastic is a passy. If you don't have kids, you will know, if you have kids, the importance of this little thing right here. My daughter calls it her Pabo. I have no idea where it came from, but it's the first word we hear every morning through the baby monitor. Pabo? Because she chucks it out of her crib. Well, the other day, we had gotten down to one of these things because we have an 80-pound yellow lab who thinks that these are candy. And we had gotten down to one. We only had one in our entire house, and we had lost it, or at least I thought that we had lost it. So I'm looking around my house, turning everything upside down. I'm like, babe, where's Pabo? And she's like, it's on Lennon's dresser. And I said, it's not on Lennon's dresser. And she says, did you look? And I was like, wives in the room, you know how bad we are at looking. She's like, go look again. I went and looked again, didn't find it. She comes in, moves the wipes over to the right, and Pabo. We look for all the right things in the wrong places. And Jesus is saying, hey, you got to pay attention because the culture and the world is going to convince you that the right things are actually in the wrong places. The culture is going to try to convince you that your expectations, your ambitions, your preferences, your frustrations, they're justified, and hold on to them at all costs. And there was two groups of people that we actually see in verse 1 of Matthew 16, the Pharisees and the Sadducees, who got it all wrong. They were constantly misinterpreting the meaning of the Torah and the Old Testament and the heart of God. So we're going to go back to verse 1 where it says the Pharisees and Sadducees, they came to Jesus and they tested him by asking him to show them a sign from heaven. Other translations say that they demanded him give them a sign from heaven. And when you think about who are these people, the Pharisees and the Sadducees, the Pharisees, they were teachers and kind of Bible nerds, kind of like me. Like they just loved reading the Bible all the time. I'm in seminary right now and I had no idea the level of meaning that is found in this, but you can quickly become a geek. So it's like Pharisees are seminary grads. They just know everything about the Bible and they're projecting that onto every single person that will listen to them. And then you find the Sadducees. They're a family who runs the temple and kind of the local part of the municipality and the kind of the culture there. Think about like a family dynasty that is running things. Think about like the Kennedy family or the Bush family that have just been around for generations, subjecting themselves on kind of the culture and of the way of living. And these two groups, the Pharisees and the Sadducees, they hated each other because of a couple core beliefs. But check this out. When Jesus walked on the scene, all of a sudden they had a common enemy. And this has nothing to do with the message, but don't we do this? Aren't we really, really good at finding common enemies? We find people who dislike the same people that we dislike, and we're like, we are best friends. Can I just be honest? That is the opposite of the way of Jesus. If you're not a Jesus follower in the room, I guess you can have common enemies. If you're a Jesus follower in the room, you can't have a common enemy. When we were technically, in Paul's words, we were enemies with God, Jesus came for us, showed us a better way to approach the people who we disagree with and who we dislike. You've all heard the saying, misery loves company. But the truth is misery has never led to lasting and healthy change in the world. We've got to let the common enemy thing go. That has nothing to do with the message. But the point about them testing or demanding this sign from Jesus, I think a lot of us, we have demands of our family, we have demands of our friends, and ultimately we have demands of God. And we go to God and we're like, God, if you do this, then I'll do that. And if you do this, I'll believe in you. And if you write me a message in the cloud, I'll finally follow you. And the reality is demands don't work with God because the tone of God's kingdom is only relational, and demands are not a function of a healthy relationship. A lot of us, we think that we can just demand our way to health in our relationship with others or with God. And Jesus is saying the exact opposite here, because this is his response. He replied, when evening comes, you say, it will be fair weather, for the sky is red. And in the morning, today it will be stormy, for the sky is red and overcast. You know how to interpret the appearance of the sky, but you cannot interpret the signs of the times. A wicked and adulterous generation looks for a sign, but none will be given except the sign of Jonah. Jesus left them and went away. He's like, you wicked and adulterous generation, mic drop, I'm out. The only sign that you get, Jonah. Well, they're all Bible nerds. They've read Torah. They know the Old Testament. Jonah was a guy, if you grew up in church, he was the guy that you learned about that was swallowed up by a fish for 3 days. And you got to be thinking, they're like, what does the Jaws theme song have anything to do with who God is and what God is like, and what does a sign from heaven look like? Like, how does that meet the thing that we are looking for? And when you look pretty closely, you actually see so many similarities between the story of Jonah and the story of Jesus. Jonah was on a ship in the middle of a storm. The reason for the storm is he was defying what God was calling him to do. God called him to a place called Nineveh. He thought it was disgusting. He said, I'm not going. I'm going this way. Storm comes up. He has to jump off of the boat into the sea to his death from what he thought in order to save the lives of the soldiers on the ship. He gets swallowed by this fish. Then God has the fish spit him out on the beach after 3 days. I know, crazy story. If you didn't grow up with the Bible, we can talk about it after. I totally understand. There are some things in the Bible. And then what ends up happening is he ends up going to Nineveh. He gives this 5-word speech, and everything begins to change for the people of Nineveh. And here's the reality that Jesus is trying to point to. Jonah gave up his life and lived out his purpose. Jesus was about to do the same exact thing. He was about to go to a cross, and that was going to serve as the sign from heaven. What's the sign of Christianity all around the world today? It's a cross. Jesus knew what he was talking about. But he goes on in the next section. When they crossed the lake, in verse 5, the disciples forgot to take bread. I love that Matthew's pointing this out. He totally removes himself from the group, right? He's like, they forgot to take bread. For those of you, never mind, not going there. But also, why is bread so expensive? Verse 6, be careful, is Jesus' response. They forgot to take bread. Jesus says, be careful. Jesus said to them, be on your guard against the yeast of the Pharisees and the Sadducees. See, they discussed this amongst themselves and said, it is because we didn't bring any bread. Totally missing the point. Well, why does Jesus say the phrase, be careful? Because what we get fixated on is what ends up shaping us. Our fixations become limitations because of how we get stuck on them. And the truth is when you are fixated on you can't see what matters most. When you get fixated on you, what is ultimately true gets manipulated to fit the narrative of your own success. And when you are fixated on you, you miss the God-given opportunity that is right in front of you. When you are fixated on your ambitions and your preferences, your frustrations, God's saying, you're missing the point. What is ultimately true is getting manipulated to fit the narrative of the things that you are carrying through this life. Don't make that mistake. And I think that this leads us to an equation that I think we all believe to some degree. And it's that we are greater than really anything else. Our expectations are greater than anything that goes in the blank. Our preferences are greater than anything that goes in the blank. Our ambitions, our frustrations are most justified because we are at the top of the world. We get fixated on ourselves so quickly because we're told this by the culture. If you just put your head down and focus on success, then you'll end up in the right spot. And that is exactly the opposite of the way of Jesus. The text goes on, aware of their discussion. Jesus asked, you have little faith. Ouch. Why are you talking amongst yourselves about having no bread? Do you still not understand? Do you remember? The 5 loaves for the 5,000, and how many basketfuls you gathered, referring to this miracle of feeding the 5,000, or the 7 loaves for the 4,000, and how many basketfuls that you gathered, because there was an abundance. How is it that you don't understand that I was not talking to you about a bag of bread? But be on your guard against the yeast of the Pharisees and the Sadducees. And Jesus is making a direct parallel to what he says in John chapter 6. And the statement is, I am the bread of life. In other words, Jesus equals life. In light of the equation that we fall for so easily, that we are greater than whatever can go in the blank, Jesus is saying, if you want to find life, you've got to come to me. And the yeast of the teaching of the Pharisees and the Sadducees, they are so caught up on the first equation that they are missing the source of true and eternal life. Don't make that same mistake. Then they understood that he was not telling them to guard against the yeast used in bread, but against the teaching of the Pharisees and the Sadducees. And the truth is that the Pharisees and the Sadducees, they relied on something called self-justification. They were convinced that they could do enough good and they could enforce the law enough for one day, and everybody obeyed the law for the day, that God would come back, kick Rome out of power, and everything would be good, and they would be the ruling class with God. And the difference between self-justification and sanctification is so critically important, because self-justification relies on the phrase, but I know what I want. But I did the right thing. But I didn't lie. But I didn't cuss for 2 minutes. But I didn't sleep with them. But I. And Jesus is saying that is the 100% wrong approach. The only approach that you need to experience my life is but Jesus. But Jesus came. But Jesus embraced the cross. But Jesus said that he is the way, the truth, and the life. But Jesus saved sinners. But Jesus hung out with those people. But Jesus is the only phrase that we need to experience the full weight and power of the sanctification of Jesus, which actually leads us to a whole nother equation to add to the list. We've got to strike out the first one. We've got to remove that from our way of thinking. And at the bottom, we've got to add that we is greater than me. Here in Wilmington, that's why we brought up families to dedicate their babies in this space, because that is an activity of we. And we believe we to be greater than me. That's why every person in our church, we believe that you should be serving somewhere. That's why we want everybody who calls Port City home to be giving in some way. It's because we want to be together. It's a core tenet of who we are, not by our own volition and vision, by the vision of Jesus. Because of Jesus' life, and we live in a world that operates on me is greater than anything else, we've got to have each other to help each other get back to the true bread of life. So then what comes next is fascinating. In verse 13, Matthew takes the story to another level. It says, when Jesus came to the region of Caesarea Philippi, he asked his disciples, who do people say that the Son of Man is? It's one of Jesus' favorite ways to refer to himself. They replied, some say John the Baptist, others say Elijah, and others say Jeremiah, or one of the prophets. In other words, we don't really know. But what about you? He asked. Who do you say that I am? And when you look closely, the word say in that last question can also be translated tell. Who do you tell other people that I am? Can I ask you a question? When you're busy carrying around your expectations, preferences, ambitions, and living underneath the weight of your frustrations, who are you telling people Jesus is? Because people know. People know you come to church. People know you follow Jesus. Your family knows. But what's the activity telling them? It's a question that we all need to wrestle with to some degree and evaluate it daily, if not multiple times a day. But check out what Peter says Simon Peter answered, "You are the Messiah, the Son of the living God." And Jesus replied, "Blessed are you, Simon of Jonah. For this was not revealed to you by flesh and blood, but by my Father in heaven." Notice the first word out of Jesus' mouth, that you are blessed. When you come to put your faith in the ultimate, you find eternal blessing. Now, the trick here is we think of the word blessing as we get all of the needs and all of the things about our expectations met. That we get to live out all of our ambitions, that all of our frustration goes away, and we get to keep all of our preferences and all of our conveniences. And Jesus is saying, no, this is so much higher of a blessing because it lasts for eternity, which means it's on the terms of eternity. It functions differently. But the reality is, with a blessing comes a calling, which is what he begins to lay the pretext for in verse 21. Matthew says, "From that time on, Jesus began to explain to his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem and suffer many things at the hands of the elders, the chief priests, and the teachers of the law, the Pharisees and the Sadducees, and that he must be killed and on the third day be raised to life." Notice the timeline that Matthew gives us in Jesus' teaching. Jesus has got to go to Jerusalem, a place marked by uncomfort for Jesus because people in Jerusalem were conspiring actively against him, trying to figure out how to bring a charge against him so that they could get rid of him. And Jesus is saying, I'm going into the discomfort because that's the only way to live out my calling. Then he's got to suffer many things at the hands of the Pharisees and the Sadducees. Then he's got to embrace the cross. He's got to be killed. And then, and only then, is he going to experience resurrection? Is he going to experience life? And Peter, he's sitting over there going, no, Messiah boy needs some correction. There's no way that is the way that this should be, because the message of Jesus is so unbelievably countercultural. Peter's like, there's no way that that's going to be what happens. So Peter took him and began to rebuke him. "Never, Lord." Just imagine this for a second. Jesus just fed 5,000 people. And he's like, "No, Jesus, you got it wrong. I know better than you. Never, Lord. This shall never happen to you." Remember, Peter's the one who cut the dude's ear off in the next part of the story. If you don't know that part of the story, it's awesome. The culture is just like Peter in today's world, saying, no, suffering, inconvenience, my expectations, like no, Jesus, no, you're not gonna suffer. You're not gonna go to the cross. For us, it's no different. The voice of culture is coming to our life saying, if it's inconvenient, leave it behind. You're justified in your frustrations. Yeah, you can respond in kind because they hurt you. Follow your ambitions at all costs. Be convenienced at every turn. That's the voice of the culture. Jesus' response is very stern and is very, very clear. He says, Jesus turned and said to Peter, "Get behind me, Satan. You are a stumbling block to me, and you do not have in mind the concerns of God, but merely human concerns." And the reality is that human concerns, they will keep you from the life that God has for you. As long as we're busy carrying around the weight of ourself and our expectations, we're gonna miss the life that God has for us, which is the building up to the statement that we started the message with. Then Jesus said to his disciples, "Whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me." To put it in the context of the timeline that Jesus was laying out as an example for all of us of how we get to resurrection life through the cross is this, is we've got to go to Jerusalem in the same way that Jesus did, in the sense we've got to move towards discomfort. We've got to learn how to be in the uncomfortable places. We have to learn how to do the uncomfortable things. We have to deny that voice in our head that says, stick with convenience, stick with comfort. When we're embracing and we come face to face with suffering, we've got to remember that suffering is never the ending in the context of the kingdom of God. Redemption is on its way. Redemption is happening right now. There is going to be a final word, and it's going to be from the Lord of Lords and the King of Kings. We must hold on to that hope. We must embrace the way of the cross by choosing self-denial. We must deny these things because our form is wrong. And only then do we find everlasting life. When we choose to follow Jesus to the cross. Which is why in verse 25, Jesus makes a statement of reality, not a command. He says, for whoever wants to save their life, they will lose it. But whoever loses their life for me will find it. That's not a command. That's a statement of reality. And we have the wrong form because we are desperately holding on to the things that we think bring us life. But they disappoint us every single time. There's a word for that. It's to live within denial. And Jesus is saying that the only way in a world that lives by and in denial, the only way to experience life is through self-denial. It's the only way. Because if you try to grip this too much, you're going to get hurt. Because that's not the way that it was ever intended to be. He takes it a step further. What good will it be for someone to gain the whole world, yet forfeit their soul? Or what can anyone give in exchange for their soul? And if we were just all being really, really honest with ourselves today, some of us, we have forfeited the health of our soul in the name of holding up our expectations, our preferences, our ambitions. And we've been looking to the authority of our frustrations for far, far too long. And we wonder why we feel sick inside. Like something's not right. And Jesus is saying, this is the answer. You've got to follow me to the cross. Denying yourself is the only way to become and to remain available. It's as if Jesus is saying, fix your form. You're gonna get hurt if you hold on too tight. But don't worry, because what comes next will be far, far better than anything that you could have imagined in your context. He says, for the Son of Man, in verse 27, is going to come in his Father's glory with his angels, and then he will reward each person according to what they have done. According to what they have been willing to deny. Because according to Jesus, in a world that's living in denial, self-denial, it's the only way to truly live. And Paul points to this in his letter to the church in Ephesus. He says, in the coming ages, he might show the incomparable riches of his grace, expressed in his kindness to us in Christ Jesus. The kindness of Jesus to embrace the cross for the sake of our salvation, but also to show us the way, to show us the path that we must take in order to experience everlasting and eternal life in our everyday, ordinary, actual lived life. The question for us to wrestle with Are we willing to let it go? When you leave here today, when you log off of this broadcast, when you walk out of Leland today, are you willing to let it go? Or are you gonna hold on to the thing that Jesus said to deny? Jesus, we thank you for today. Thank you for your example. Thank you for your word, and thank you for your invitation. God, thank you for giving us a grace and a source of life that is truly incomparable. God, thank you for this gathering of people united underneath your name and your authority. God, I pray that we would just let it go, that we would release the grip, that we would fix our form, and in turn, experience the source of life that never runs dry. We say all of this in the name of Jesus. Amen.